And welcome back. And we are moving into the first part of our conversation for today, where we are joined by Danladi Husaini, who is a doctoral student currently in pharmacology and toxicology. And he's a former professor at the University of Belize and has conducted a research on building or destroying the future of Belize. Should we decriminalize marijuana? Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Yes.
And thank you very much for having me here. Thank you also for taking time to cover the Caribbean Association Pharmacists Convention last week, where this presentation was made. So I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad that we were able to get you while you were visiting for the purpose of the conference.
No, I actually live here.
Okay.
Yes, I live right in Belmopan.
Oh,
yes.
Nice.
So let's talk about the presentation and the research that you've conducted. First of all, what prompted you to dive into exploring this particular topic?
Okay, well, first let me mention that my area of expertise is medicinal herbs.
Okay.
Okay, so I deal with plants, and I've conducted a number of researches on plants. And here, you will agree with me, we have a lot of plants here that are medicinal and have a lot of economic value as well. And I know one of the things that the University of Belize is working towards is to get a medicinal plant research center where when people come, they can work with them right there at the university to be able to make all the discoveries. So this study is not a personal study. It was a study that was conducted in 9 different countries.
Okay.
Yeah, the same tool from with 10 different professors from 10 different universities.
Wow.
Yes. Some of the countries in the Caribbean included Trinidad and Tobago. Jamaica was part of that study. Dominican Republic was also St. Kitts and Nevis. Belize is one of them. Mexico, Colombia, Chile, they're all parts of the country. So there was first a training in Canada for 12 weeks to conduct this study. And so it was something that was from the United OAS, yes, that the drug section of that did that. So they sponsored the training, they sponsored the design for the project, and then we were just to come collect data and analyze and make a presentation. So what you have here is actually a fraction of the study. It's not the complete study. We had to submit the report to them, which we did, and they are hoping to publish it themselves. But we have
as a collective region,
as a collective research from the 9 different sites, different professors at 10 different universities. Right. So, but we have the permission to share some of the information that we gathered from the study.
Now let's speak specifically to Belize.
Right.
What are the results indicating from this particular
No, you don't
study?
jump into results first.
My apology.
Right. You jump into the background.
The background. Okay, let's start with the background.
Right. So the background is, and specifically for this topic, for the presentation that was made last week, permit me to say that the Belize Pharmacists Association did a wonderful job in organizing the conference last week. It was great. The people were happy, and the organization was wonderful. So I want to say kudos to the Pharmacists Association of Belize. It was a wonderful. Now, so what we were looking at is the perception of harms and benefits of marijuana use among teenagers ages 15 to 17. That was the study that was conducted in these 10 different sites in 9 different countries. The background of that study is countries are definitely looking towards decriminalizing marijuana. That's for sure. Some countries, some states in the US have done that. Jamaica has done that. And other Caribbean countries are looking into that. So it is with that background that we're looking at. All right, so if you decriminalize marijuana, what will be the impact.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's the background of the study.
You know, I appreciate you pointing out the fact that countries within the region are looking to decriminalize. And in fact, when we look at some of the conversations that take place at the OAS General Assembly, while we tend to focus more on Belize with Guatemala relations, this has been a topic that has come up for conversation for quite a few times.
That's right.
So obviously, this study will help to push, I'm sure, countries in this region to make a decision or to further explore this issue. Now, I don't want to lose sight of one of the things you said, because you said that you looked at the perceptions of harms and benefits. Now, that's key, because it's not saying, it's looking at what young people think, and not necessarily what the science is showing.
No. Now, I'm going to talk on both the science.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, I find myself in a real hot seat this morning because one, I am a scientist. I'm a lecturer. I lecture for about 25 years at the university. I am also a pastor. So that makes, and I'm also a politician. Now, so and I'm also an economist. Now, if you look at marijuana, it has a lot of implications. People get excited about this discussion. But at the same time, marijuana has been in existence before all of us were born. We that are currently living in the world today, marijuana has outlived all of us. That's one. Two, people get emotional religiously. And we shouldn't be emotional about it without facts. At the same time, so marijuana has a religious implication. There are religions that think that they have to smoke marijuana. Is that correct?
Yes,
right.
you are.
But people also look at it from the political point of view. But people also look at it from the medicinal point of view. So you see, I am looking at it from the medicinal point of view, but I'm also looking at it from a psychosocial point of view. Why? Because if you check the topic, building or destroying, marijuana is a double-edged sword. It can actually build, it can also destroy. And so if you look at the destructive aspect of it, is what we have, everybody's afraid of. And rightfully so, we should be afraid of that. But have we looked at the building aspect of it? So in terms of building aspect of marijuana, we're looking at medicinal aspect of marijuana. We're looking at economic aspect of marijuana.
Can I jump in here?
Yes, go ahead.
I find this interesting, sort of like the example of the state of Colorado, where they have essentially decriminalized and legalized marijuana so that it has now become big. It has now become big business in terms of their economy. And I look at that perhaps as a module that can be emulated by Belize at some point in the future when we get to that place and time. What are your thoughts on the economics of marijuana in terms of being able to help to grow Belize if we were to ever get to that point?
So you're asking my personal thoughts, not the study now.
Your personal position.
In terms of my personal thoughts, I would say a few things. One, whether we like it or not, countries are making money out of marijuana. That's for sure. That's for sure. Unfortunately, though, we as a country, there are a lot of things we need to look into before we even begin to think of decriminalization. One is, do we have sufficient data on how people will react when marijuana is decriminalized? Two, how is our legal system? Does it have the capacity to be able to deal with the issues of decriminalization of marijuana? Three, what about our health system? Because if you have people using marijuana, one of the effects of marijuana is people are going to have mental problems. That is for sure. Now, however, we need to differentiate between recreational marijuana and medical marijuana. You see, my opinion is we are not ready for recreational marijuana. But at the same time, government should think of legislation in terms of medical marijuana. That is for sure. Now, people get... Yes, just hold on. Let me learn a little bit.
Sure.
People get excited because it's marijuana, and rightfully so. We should. But as a pharmacologist, most of the drugs you have in the pharmacy today, I mean, some of them came from plants.
Of course.
Yes. And we will continue to discover drugs from plants. Presently, part of the research I'm working on is looking at, could we have some bush at the back of the yard that can actually help the problem of hypertension, which is a non-communicable disease. And in Belize, we have two major non-communicable diseases, diabetes and hypertension. Now, before medicine, people have used bushes to treat a lot of... Now, marijuana is one of those bushes, and it has medicinal contents. It has a lot of constituents into it, because presently, over 500 chemical constituents have been identified in marijuana alone. And so far, about 58 has been isolated. So the study is still going on and on. Now, if we jump into looking at recreation, just let's have fun with marijuana, that's not going to help us economically. Rather, it will be on the other sword edge of destruction. But if we begin to look at medicinal marijuana, let's assume that we don't even have the facilities to extract marijuana or to do all that. But let's say Colorado comes to Belize and say, I want you to grow such amount of marijuana for us and export it for us. Now, on the economic side, that is resources, that will be money coming into this country. But now you have to think of, how do I grow it? Who grows it? How do you secure?
How do you legislate it?
Some folks not breaking into the farm and just stealing the marijuana for recreation. How do you legislate it? You know, so it's a lot of discussion that need to, and government need to be at the forefront of this. You know why? If we don't act quick, before we know it, other people...
We'll lose our share out of the market.
We will lose our share of... But it's not just about money. It's about discoveries in health sciences, about drugs or medicines that can come out of marijuana.
Now, just allow me, because we have two segments we want to discuss this, and I want to ensure that we cover as much as possible, right? So we started talking a bit about the economic benefits, but if we could go back, because I think what we need to understand, and what your research clearly shows, is the real usage. In other words, we talk of an issue, but you have the data to substantiate how widely it's used and at what age. Let's talk about what the real picture is in Belize when it comes to marijuana usage.
Now, this study is not, we will not claim it's a representation of the whole entire Belize population. Because the study was only conducted among high school students in 2 cities, but among 3 high schools. So data was collected in just 3 high schools in 2 major cities. Now, so already that's a limitation. For instance,
that's urban.
If I collect data in Belize City high schools, and this for the same research, and I go to collect the same data in Corozal or Georgeville or somewhere, the population, the environment, the use of marijuana may differ from these. But our intention was to just check to see, how do you perceive? Does marijuana has benefits? Or does it is it harmful? And we were not the first to conduct this study in high schools. However, ours was looking at the study in terms of, if marijuana is legalized, what would you do? How would you respond to it in a hypothetical setting? So what we check, we were looking at 3 indices that were presented here, indicators. One, if you have actually used marijuana before, and of course, like I mentioned, Bricenio and Oliveira, at the University of Belize, who is with the social works, he has done a study.
Yes.
He used to be a colleague of mine. They have done that study. And of course, they discovered that students in high school use marijuana.
That's right.
Now, we also confirm that. So the first thing is we confirm, yes, these students are still using marijuana in these particular high schools and in these cities that we studied. Now, we look at the percentage of the people that were using it, and we went further to find out your friends, do they use marijuana? And why friends?
Because sometimes children don't self-report.
Self-report, but peer pressure. So peer pressure can push someone.
Yeah.
If I have 10 friends that are using marijuana, the likelihood is I am likely going to be influenced by them through peer pressure to smoke marijuana. So we look at their friends, if their friends use marijuana, and then we look at their perception of harms. Do you think marijuana is harmful? And then we look at, do you think of the benefits? And benefits in terms of, do you think it will help you cope with psychological stress, emotional stress? Do you think it will help you academically? Do you think it will help you in terms of your friends? Will they admire you if you smoke marijuana? So if you check this is the first result that indicated that about 41.1% in their lifetime indicated that they smoke marijuana.
Almost half of the high school students
Almost
you polled.
half of the high school students. And then in the last 1 year, out of that population, about 39.2% of them also indicated that they have smoked marijuana. So we narrowed it down to the last 1 month. Have you smoked marijuana in the last 1 month? And then about 24.9% indicated that yes, they smoked marijuana in the last 1 month. Now, the tools that were used for this study were internationally recognized tools. They were just adopted for this particular study. And like I mentioned, this study was co-sponsored by the OAS, but training was done at the University of Toronto, Center for Addiction and Mental Health. And so the training was conducted there and everything, and we got ethical approval from there, and also ethical approval from Ministry of Health right here in Belize. So if you check the onset of action, average onset of action based on our findings was 12 years. That's the average.
Wow.
But you can also check to see the percentage of people that take marijuana from ages 7 to 12 and from 13 to 17. Of course, we have the number of people that said they have not smoked marijuana is higher compared to those that said they smoke marijuana. So let's get that straight.
So age of onset means first use.
Yes, at the age for which you started using it.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the average of all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about 12 years.
About 12 years
About
old.
12 years old, yeah.
Which is more or less your experiment, like the beginning of your
That's like
experimental phase,
right.
First form, second form.
Right. So,
Wow.
and the study was among ages 15 to 17. We narrowed the study to just that age, 15 to 17. Yes, and that's the average onset. Now, but you cannot take it away from young people to experiment. Experimentation is one of the things. They experiment with many things, not just marijuana, with alcohol, all that. Now, and we cannot stop that. However, we can delay the initiation of experimentation. And that comes really by education. And I think NDAC is doing a great job in reaching out to the high school students to ensure that they educate them on that.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier that stood out to me, and I would just want to go back to it for some clarity, or if you can shed some more light on it. The idea of moving towards or looking at the possibility of medical marijuana and economics. When I look around present day Belize from a practical perspective, it would seem as though a majority of those who consume marijuana is for recreational use primarily. You correct me if I'm wrong.
Well,
how do we
conducted that research?
It would seem that way,
but it is that way. It appears that way.
When you look at the arrests being made as well, when you look at the seizure of the various quantities of marijuana being sold on the market. I don't know that people are purchasing marijuana solely for medicinal use. I know that some people deal with marijuana for arthritis and other forms of ailment, but the vast majority of people in my age group, or when I was growing up in my teens and what have you, were people who just on the weekends or after school, or a bunch of us are hanging out, someone would roll up, light up, and pass it around. And that doesn't indicate medicinal purpose. So if you look at that in the economic sense, how would you see something like that working for us in Belize, where we're not necessarily medicating for that purpose?
Now, you see, when we talk about marijuana for medicinal purposes, we're not talking about even inhalational marijuana where you smoke it.
You could extract oils and other stuff.
So it's an extraction process. And currently, the recommended dosage, even for what has been instructed, is 2 grams. So, yes, it's not 2 milligrams, not 2 grams. And now you need to understand there are varieties of the plant of marijuana. There is the cannabis sativa, which has been used and is still being used. Probably the shirt you're wearing, you and I, might have...
It's hemp, right?
Marijuana, the hemp, yes. It's used in construction, it's used to extract oils, it's used in variety of purposes. And that has very limited concentration of the active ingredient that causes the psychoactive problems, which is the THC. Right, but you also have the cannabis indica, which has the high concentration of THC. So if we're talking about looking at marijuana from a medicinal point of view, we're not talking about giving approval to people to smoke marijuana. We're talking about that researches are going on, and one of the things government need to look into is to probably give special licenses for research. At the University of Belize, for instance, which is our national university, they need to get into that. At the pharmacy department, we have a team there that works on medicinal plants and all that, and they need to look into that. Now, if I am a researcher and I get a bunch of marijuana and I'm driving it to the lab and I get arrested now by the police, I'm going to jail. So I can't delve into research into marijuana if there's a legislation that prevents me from doing that. So we have to first look at institutionalized approvals, not approvals for just smoking weed and hanging around with friends. We're looking at how do we go into research, how do we go into probably production, how do we go into gaining the economic aspect and medicinal aspect. I hope you know it's being considered now strongly for the management of epilepsy, especially in children. You know, it's also being considered for the treatment of stroke. You know, apart from its usage in nausea and vomiting, in the cancer chemotherapy and also pain management, it has all that impact. So we shouldn't just jump into the economy. We should look into how do we first put things in place to get the economy.
Well, and of course, I think people, and usually once this conversation gets started, we hear a lot from people about what will it do to our young people if they have access to the drug more easily. And that's why I think, you know, looking at the perceptions of harm, I find it so interesting that you spoke about 12 being the average age.
Yes, that's the average age for marijuana use from this study.
Or first try, or maybe only try that one time.
Yeah, that's right.
But what are the young people saying in terms of what they think marijuana is doing to them? And I want to be very clear in saying perceived risks, do they also include the fact that it is an illegal drug?
Right. So we were looking at what if it were made legal?
Okay.
What will be their attitude?
Yeah.
Will they want to try it? So if you will go with me back to, go back to figure 3. Let me see what is the one before this.
We'll get it up.
All right. Okay. All right. So I've spoken about this already. So if you check, you see friends that smoke marijuana, about 68.1%.
Yeah.
You know, and those that said, well, they don't know if their friends smoke marijuana. Now, 68% is a very high percentage for friends that smoke marijuana. So let's move to the next slide, please. So you see the perception of risk when marijuana is used. Now we're looking at risk. So one of the questions is, do you think if marijuana is smoked once or twice, there's any risk? So look at the response. About 31.1 said there's no risk if you just smoke it once or twice.
64%.
Right. So slight risk or moderate risk. But for them to think that there's no great risk when you smoke marijuana, 9.5, it's a low. So you see, based on this data, it shows that the
young people think
it is safe. There's no risk.
Yeah.
So their perception of risk is low. And if your perception of risk is low, you're likely going to be involved in that action. So that's one of the aspects of it. But we didn't just stop at asking if they smoke it once or twice. The next slide, if they smoke it occasionally. So we're graduating from once or twice, occasionally. Now you see again a higher percentage, 20% said no risk, slight risk 23%, and moderate risk 23%. Again, this is an indication of low perception of risk.
Yeah, it's almost half.
Yeah, that's saying, well, you know, no risk is just a slight risk. Once you say it's just a slight risk, it still shows that you have, you do not have a clear understanding of the risk involved with that substance. But when we get to the next, if they smoke marijuana regularly, now they think there is a great risk. You can see from the bar, it shows great risk. Almost half of them were indicating that yes, there is. But occasionally, or once or twice, they indicated. So in terms of risk, what we discover is they have a low perception of risk. Now check again in terms of benefits, because I know you're crunched for time. The next slide. Okay, so this was a question to ask if among themselves they are aware of the risk generally of marijuana usage. Now 24% said they are not sure, 23.5 and 23.5 said they don't know if there's risk. Now if you say I don't know if there's risk, there's every tendency you might want to try to see is a risk. Right. So the next slide. Now, so these are benefits. So we're looking at benefits. Now, and this is an indication of peer pressure. Peer pressure. Admired by friends if you smoke marijuana. 46.6% said, yeah, they will be admired by their friends. But 34.1 said no. And 19.8 said sure. And 19.8 could tilt towards either way. Now, the next slide, will it help you with emotional difficulties? Again, you see 42.9% said yes, if I smoke marijuana, it's going to take care of my problems. It will help with my emotional difficulties. But the next slide, which is asks if it will improve their physical being. Now, of course, a higher percentage said no, which is good. But also the next slide on academic performance. Will it improve your academic performance? So you see, they said, no, marijuana is not going to improve my academic performance. Now, so what you see with this is there is an increased perception, moderate perception of benefits.
Okay.
And a low perception of risk. And if you have a low perception of risk, moderate perception of benefits, you're likely that is not a good statistics for our young people.
And I think what they seem to notice from your research is that there are no benefits and with the academic performance, the physical well-being, but there is a feel-good effect
with the emotion.
Seems to be your emotional difficulties.
And marijuana causes emotional problems because it causes dependence. Now it's a triphasic reaction when you take triphasic, meaning 3 phases. One, you smoke marijuana, you feel relaxed first, but it moves from relaxation to begin to feel euphoric, overexcited. Now you move to the next stage. The next stage is introspection. Introspection and metacognition, where you begin to think your own thoughts. So you're thinking about what you're thinking. you know, so you see them deeply in such deep and at that time, some of them said the spirits actually speak to them to tell them some stuff. Now that's the second phase. But when you go to the third phase, honestly, there is an increase in heart rate. And at that stage, they can also get paranoid, you know, anxiety attacks and all that. So it's a mental issue. And we have to deal with the mental issues, not just looking at academic performance or physical well-being. For them to think, if I have an emotional problem, I can smoke marijuana and I'll be good. It's a dangerous perception because it definitely affect. The major impact of marijuana is on the central nervous system.
So I think that's a great opportunity to talk about the real life benefits and harm of marijuana usage, and especially at that age. You know, talking about something that can be used for medicinal use gives the implication that there are more good qualities than bad. But I want us to talk very clearly, and you were starting to get into it, as to how marijuana affects the body. Now, I remember when I was in school, we were taught very clearly, marijuana is a drug, marijuana is a gateway drug, you're gonna get into harder drugs after that. And so we were pretty much, I mean, I think if you did this test when we were 12, 15, the results would have been different.
Right, because your perception of harm was higher.
Yes.
Of risk was higher.
And the general conversation and consensus at that time was marijuana was a drug and bad. But it's changed. You know, these children are hearing about legalization in the States, in other places. It's a more commonly used drug, and it's seen as an herbal, you know, once it's an herb, it's usually perceived to be, I'm just making my own assumptions here, it's perceived to be more natural. So let's talk about how marijuana does affect the body, the good and the bad.
All right. I've just mentioned
the brain effect.
Can you go back? So this was the conclusion of the study. Your intention to use marijuana if it is legalized. Will you use it? So less than 20% said they don't know. About 10%, 10 point something percent said they will use it less than they do it now. Less. But about 20% said they will use it more often than they use it if it is legalized and they're 18 years of age. About almost 25% said they would try it. So you see, in terms of association between harms, friends, it is an indication that if marijuana is legalized in a hypothetical setting, and I'm careful in using these words, in a hypothetical setting, kids in high school that have access to it will use marijuana in a hypothetical setting. Why? The pressure is on. One, you have a lot of friends that are already using it. Two, your perception of risk is very low. Your perception of harm, benefits is moderate. So what will stop you from trying marijuana? All right? So if you can go back to the slide.
There's a brain picture where we talk about
with the brain and all that.
They'll get it, but let's start with the conversation, right?
Right. So if you look at the effects of marijuana on the brain, these are the effects. And one of the things it does, if you check impaired learning on the hippocampus, it impairs your learning process.
Now, is this dependent, just to be very clear, on how much you use the drug? The more you use it, the more damage, or the first use may cause damage?
Now, you see, so the problem with the first use is that you might want to continue to use. That's the problem with the first use. And that's why substances that have the tendency to cause dependence, you actually discourage young people from experimenting with those substances because many have been hooked by just a stick of cigarette or a shot of alcohol. And if you look at our environment, we already have problem with alcohol. That's for sure.
Serious
lot of hard-earning people that earn their hard money, they spend it on alcohol. The alcohol business is booming. People are making a lot of money.
Engage in very risky behavior.
And then risky behaviors, your attitude, and all that. So alcohol is already a problem for us. But outside that, first thing, don't even start if you're not doing it. Don't even experiment. It's not going to do any good for you. And if you have emotional issues, there are better ways of handling emotional issues without having to smoke marijuana. All right? So, but it increases anxiety and paranoia. That is at the second stage.
That's interesting because most people view marijuana use as something that mellows you up.
Right. It mellows you down at the first phase.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you get relaxed at the first phase, but it keeps going between those phases, like I explained. It's triphasic. So it keeps. So at the first, I get relaxed, but then I start getting excited and euphoric, and then it moves to the next stage, and then it moves to the stage. The next stage is I start getting anxiety. So if I am taking it to take care of anxiety, already the drug has the tendency to provide anxiety.
And if I already have anxiety, then
I'm
it'll be
not
magnified.
really helping myself, and then I can get to panic attacks. I can get to having increased heart rate, and then I can become actually mentally destabilized by just using marijuana. So the major effect. Now there's another slice. So you see some of the
so it raises dopamine. That's the happy feeling.
Right. So it's usually on dopamine, and there are receptors that have been found pharmacologically. So it raises the brain chemical, and it makes you feel high. It affects short-term memory. It affects your walking. That's why sometimes you see them walking, hard time remembering things that just happened. Experiences are distorted. So these are all mental issues. And people that are usually trying marijuana, a number of them have gone into mental problems because of marijuana. And one of the things we have to look at a country, are we prepared for mental issues? Because already we have issues of mental health. Here and there you hear people hanging themselves. That could be an issue that we need to look at. And I know when I was back at University of Belize, the Department of Social Works, Oliveira and his team were looking into how to reach out to the nation to be able to address that particular issue. But move to another, there's a slide with the picture of
full body.
Yeah, with the full body. Right. So if you check, THC is the major trouble giver in the constituent of marijuana so far identified. Yes, tetrahydrocannabinol. Now, is the major, and the plant that produces higher THC is cannabis indica. But apart from THC, you have the CBD, the cannabidiol, you have the CBN, the cannabinol. Now, the cannabinol and cannabidiol, they have less or minimal effect on the central nervous system. Now, but you don't know which plant you're growing. Because
you don't?
a typical man in the village does not know the difference between whether it's cannabis sativa, cannabis ruderalis, cannabis indica. You don't know.
He's just growing weed.
You just grow weed. I just have weed. But the weed that makes a lot of psychological issues is the cannabis. Now, it's not that the others do not have THC. They have it, but in minimal concentration. Now, what science is doing is actually to crossbreed these plants so that they can grow those that will have pure. So if I want to produce them for drugs, I can produce just that produces a lot of drugs. So when I'm harvesting, I have a lot of THC. Or if I just want to grow it for fiber or clothing and all that, I can grow the one that produces pure CBD.
So does this then speak to the strains of marijuana?
Right. So you're talking about, and up to now, those strains have been identified, and a lot of arguments have gone in the science world. But we know that indica has more of THC. So if I'm growing, I am not, and you are not a botanist. You don't know what because there's a way you can differentiate them based on their leaves arrangement. But
or you can smoke them and see which one gives you the worst effect. Wouldn't that work too?
I do not recommend smoking it. I recommend that because presently those medications are actually on the sale in the world, for nausea and vomiting. But look at the diagram there. Can you see that the receptors. And what we talk about receptors is the point where the drug interact in the body to be able to produce an action. The receptors for marijuana are scattered in the whole body. But the concentration where THC is, you can see it is on the central nervous system. So this again is a double-edged sword. Why? You can have medications that can affect different parts of the body with correct scientific research. But you can also have marijuana, if you take it in a recreational way, that can affect and mess up your whole system. So it affects the immune system as well.
THC seems to be concentrated in the brain and in the gut.
Right, and in the gut and around the immune system as well. You know, so we can use it to boost immunity and all that. So studies are being, and the University of Belize, and I know they are moving into that direction, need to look into such studies because we can discover drugs here in Belize. Jamaica is already having pharmaceutical companies from the US going to Jamaica to patent some of their products that they extracted from marijuana. You know, so whereas sometimes we just like to talk about things, we need to move into actions. And action is to find the real situation. How do we deal with it? There are loopholes, and how do we deal with that? But of course, this study showed that our high school students have low perception of risk of marijuana use, with a moderate perception of, and also. Now, in that case, we need to begin to look at how do we deal with the young people. Of course, parents need to be involved in the upbringing of their kids. They need to teach them, look, you don't smoke marijuana. So you see, if I am a father and I'm smoking marijuana, what moral justification do I have to tell my son not to smoke it? Or if I'm not even available to speak into the life of my child? You know, so we need to look at it from different aspects. Spiritually, you know, churches, they must be involved. Parents must be involved, and the community.
The church has always been fairly quiet and rather traditional when it comes to their position on marijuana usage. That's arguable.
I don't think the church was quiet, you know, because I know there was a time that the churches came together and they actually make a matter when the committee was set, you know. So, but when I'm talking about the church, it's in terms of training. Because if young people go to church and they are not trained sufficiently to be able to understand how to deal with issues outside in terms of pressure, then it's a problem. But the primary function of training is from the parents. It's the parents. If you walk away from your family, you refuse to train your kids, who do you expect to go and train them? You know, so we need to look at all that, the family system, we need to look at the church system. We need to look at, if I have young people coming into my church, how do I deal with them? How do I train them? How do I equip them to the point that if they go and somebody is putting pressure on them to smoke marijuana, they can rather use good peer pressure to tell that person, no, you shouldn't do that.
Now we have to take an honest look at ourselves, and one of the things I think, there are two parts of the conversation we didn't get a chance to get into. One is that Belize has relatively, if you're to look at the region or the rest of the world, high marijuana usage. Top 20, I believe. And higher than Jamaica, which I think most people would be surprised by.
Higher than Netherlands. However, our statistics works against us. You need to understand that. So if Jamaica is a population of 2 million and we are a population of 350,000. If you do the comparison,
they have more people smoking, but we have a higher percentage of people.
Now, so that is the issue, because of our statistic will always work against us. But it's a reality. People are smoking marijuana. I agree with you.
Now, this conversation was more heightened, or was heightened in 2012, 2013.
When the committee was set.
When there was a committee established. We haven't seen or heard much from this committee since then, but it was an indicator that government was looking at the possibility of decriminalizing, not legalizing, which are two different concepts. Certain quantities of recreational marijuana. So I want to say, if you had to put these two factors into your own, and we're asking you your opinion now, as to whether or not this is a good decision for the country based on what you have found in your research, and looking also globally at the economic benefits other countries are drawing from. And you know, I don't have the statistics on me, but we know Colorado, for example, has had major growth economically.
California is next.
California as well. Las Vegas recently implemented their decriminalization, but interestingly enough, they're having issues with the alcohol board, who feel that the marijuana is competing too much with the use of alcohol. So there are many other spin-offs that can take place, but I want to put it in the context. Economic benefit, the percentage of use of marijuana in the country, and the fact that there is a consideration on the table since 2012 for a decriminalization of a small portion of marijuana for recreational use.
Now, I have read the report. I don't know if you did. And my personal opinion is it is a good starter to have a discussion looking at. All right, you know, when you start a discussion, that also helps you to get the feelings of the people, and it's a good thing to start. But decriminalizing marijuana for recreation, what benefit will it provide for Belize?
I believe the argument in that is less young men in jail.
Right. So the issue is to look at legislation on how to deal with that. You see, because if you don't have structures in place and you open a can of worms, you're going to have problems. And we have spoken about those problems. The health system, the legal system, even the police department, are they ready to be able to address people that are caught with more than the required quantity? And then if you're saying, I am allowed to have that quantity, do you know I can have that quantity every day? And I can use it every day. You know, why? Because you have already given me the permission. So for me, decriminalizing marijuana for recreation is not the way forward. But looking at it from medicinal aspect. And that's my personal opinion. On the medicinal aspect, we're going to have benefits. On the economic aspect, in terms of growing special
becoming agro-producers,
like you have sugarcane growing into something. But again, the legislature is very important. The security, for instance, if you have to move marijuana from one point to another, do you need machine guns and police escort and all that? Because those are the issues you need to consider. And we already have issues on the ground that we need to deal with. Already issues of mental health are a problem to us. And we need to deal with that. How many mental home institutions do we have?
One.
How functional it is? How trained are the personnel? Is it sufficient to handle issues? No. So if we jump into decriminalizing just because of recreation, we have missed the point. What we just do is to open up the door for, now you can imagine, if young people think that, well, you know, now it's no longer illegal, I can just, I mean, I can have access to it. While it is illegal, you still have a high percentage of young people using it. So when it becomes decriminalized, and let me tell you, an average high school student probably doesn't even know what the meaning of decriminalization is. In his mind, he thinks, oh, government has approved the use of marijuana, so I just need to take a puff and I don't have to be afraid of. But again, I do not subscribe to young people having their records messed up, you know, by going to jail. I do not subscribe to that. I'm not a specialist in that, but we need to look at how do we address that issue. I know we can study other Caribbean countries. We cannot compare ourselves with Colorado. Those are Western world that are developed. They have records in place. They have everything in place. That is not the basis. Systems, no basis for comparison. You know, we can say, oh, because Colorado. No, but we can begin to look at Jamaica. For instance, in Jamaica, it's decriminalized, but you can't smoke marijuana in public. If they catch you, you'll be given a ticket. You'll be fined. You still pay a lot of money. You know, so despite the fact that it's decriminalized, it's still an offense if you're caught. And part of why they decriminalized it was because they have a religion there that believes in taking marijuana. But above that, they were looking at the medicinal aspect of it. So University of Technology, Jamaica is already growing marijuana and extracting it. They extract the oils. They are already looking at patents from the US to come and two of their professors already have patents from the US to supply and what they have already discovered from marijuana. So that's a lot of money into the economy and all that. But are we ready for that? Would we be building or destroying? So as I conclude, let me say that marijuana is still a substance that we'll be discussing, but we must set aside emotions to be able to discuss it factually, truthfully, to be able to come up with what is the way forward. How do we deal with? So you see, all this discussion that is being considered for decriminalization, the committee did not look into the vulnerable population. And that's the future of Belize. You and I, we are on our way very soon out. These guys will become the ministers and all that. So you have a minister who is always smoking marijuana to come to office. What do you expect? That he can't remember which file he should have signed or something.
That already happened.
Let's not go there.
I don't know about that, but I'm looking at the future. I'm looking at the young people.
It's a legitimate point you're making.
I'm looking at the young people. So we can't set them up to fail. So we must put strategies in place to ensure that.
And to be fair, we have moved towards establishment of drug courts as well. I think that is a step in the right direction as well. We appreciate so much you bringing to us the research that you put together on this particular issue. And as you very fairly said in the beginning, this is only one aspect. This is looking at perceptions and specifically with high school students from the two major cities. So it is only one aspect of it, but we really appreciate the opportunity to speak about data and research that is being conducted locally. So thank you once again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break now. And when we come back, we'll be talking about intellectual property rights. So stay tuned.